Chapter 8. Voices rose, and the ceiling shook with the pounding of running feet. My heart raced as I struggled feebly against my bonds. What if someone really did wind up down here? Panicked, in the heat of battle, and finding a bound woman alone below the ship's deck. My chest seized, realizing what was most likely to happen. I listened for the sound of someone coming down the steps, waiting breathlessly. But no one came. After several moments, there was another gunshot, and the shouting began to die down. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Was it over? So quickly? The seconds slid by agonizingly slow as I listened, straining to hear what was going on. They were talking again, in lower registers, too quietly for me to make out from where I was. A short growl of frustration escaped my throat as I wrenched at the ropes holding me again, not expecting anything to come of it. Naturally, Grayson's knots held fast. The voices continued above, and before long, I heard more footsteps, pacing back and forth, but now with less urgency. There were a few more thuds, like something heavy being dropped onto the deck. Had they been successful after all? I could only imagine that they were now dragging loot over from the poor merchant ship that had been unlucky enough to cross their path. Recalling the gunshot, nausea brewed in my stomach, and I wondered if anyone had been hurt. I wasn't sure how long I waited, listening to the noise from above and desperately trying to decipher what was going on, until the sound of footsteps coming down the hall grabbed my attention. I ended my staring contest with the ceiling and looked at the door, heart rate once again quickening. But it was only Grayson. His eyes locked with mine, and he shot me what seemed to be a forced smile.
"Still sitting pretty, I see,"
he said, making his way over to me. It took me a moment to remember that I was cross with him, and struggled against the ropes to express as much.
"You're going to have to hold still if you want me to untie you,"
he said, kneeling on the floor beside me.
"Unless you're trying to tell me that you'd like to spend more time like this."
I furrowed my brow into a glare and let out an exasperated sigh through my nose. Grayson caught my chin between his thumb and forefinger, forcing my gaze to meet his.
"Well?"
he prompted me. Begrudgingly, I shook my head, clenching my teeth against the knotted cloth in my mouth, and trying to ignore the way his touch made my skin tingle.
"Didn't think so."
He released my chin, and then gave a tug on my arm, pulling me back onto my stomach so he could free me. I noted that although he had a perfectly good dagger at his side, he was instead undoing each of the knots by hand. The pressure the ropes had been applying began to ease, and I squirmed impatiently, releasing a few insistent muffled noises until he finally undid the gag with a sigh of exasperation. I was quick to spit it out, letting out a breath of relief. A stream of obscenities sprang to my tongue that I itched to let loose, but I bit them back. If I started swearing at him, I was sure Grayson would take no issue with putting the gag back in my mouth and leaving me tied up to stew for a few more hours. He finally released my arms, and I was able to push myself to my knees and stand, stifling the groan of painful relief as my shoulders finally relaxed. I raised myself onto the balls of my feet to stretch my legs, casting a furtive glance at Grayson over my shoulder. He didn't look at me, instead seeming rather focused on coiling up the rope that now laid in heaps and tangles on the floor around him. A blush rose to my cheeks. I angrily turned away from him, clenching my teeth and willing it to go away.
"Go back to your cabin. It's still a bit messy on deck,"
Grayson said suddenly, without looking up. before I could wonder what he meant by that. A sound cut through the air from above us. A scream, so full of pain that it made my chest seize in distress. I heard gunshots, I remembered. Is someone hurt?
Nothing you need to concern yourself with.
Grayson grunted, slowly pushing himself off the ground with the coiled rope in one hand. Another scream, followed by a chorus of voices. What were they doing? Had one of them been shot? My mind raced to imagine what kind of remedy pirates would apply to a gunshot wound. I highly doubted any of them had the knowledge to administer an even remotely proper treatment. My instincts took over, and I made my way purposefully towards the door, throwing it open. Grayson seemed to detect my intentions before I got very far, and I heard him start to follow.
Don't!
Before he could try to stop me, I broke into a run down the hallway, making my way for the stairs.
Everly!
He shouted. I burst out on deck, already breathless with anticipation of the scene laid out before me. Sure enough, there were a few pirates gathered around one of their crewmates lying on the deck, with spatters of blood staining the wooden planks underneath him. Groans and cries of pain rose from the man on the ground, and I saw one of the pirates approaching with a large blade, glowing orange with heat. A streak of horror ran through me. They're going to amputate. Of course they would resort immediately to amputation. After all, limiting the chance of an infection this way was better than one of them trying to remove the bullet without knowing how. My eyes flickered back down to the victim, quickly identifying his right leg as the source of the bleeding. My feet moved on their own, and I was unable to stop myself. "Wait!" I found myself saying, and then said it louder when no one seemed to hear me. "Wait!" Several of the pirates turned, and Captain McFarley's gaze was drawn to me in surprise as I approached the scene. I only made it about halfway before a hand snatched my arm from behind and yanked me backwards.
Everly!
Grayson looked utterly exasperated.
You don't want to see this,
he repeated, as I tried to pull away from him. "Get off me!" I protested and gave him a shove. To my surprise, he actually reeled backwards a few steps, but was quick to seize me again and keep me from going any further. "I can help!" I insisted, raising my voice to be heard above the moans of pain. My mouth moved faster than I could think, as I quickly tried to spit out my arguments before they could do anything stupid. "I might be able to get the bullet out safely. You don't have to." Grayson opened his mouth to say something, but it was Captain McFarley who cut me off, voice rising above all the rest.
"Grayson,"
he said sharply.
"Let go of her."
Grayson complied, furrowing his brow. I turned to look at Captain McFarley, who had put out a hand to stop the man with a heated knife.
"You think you can get the bullet out of his leg without him having to lose it?"
he asked, eyebrows knitting together. I swallowed hard, faltering. With several pairs of eyes on me, my confidence in the subject matter was rapidly dwindling, but it was hardly the time to start doubting myself now. I took a careful step towards the man, to get a better look at the wound. The bullet had entered through his calf, leaving behind a hole that continued to ooze blood. From this angle, the bullet shouldn't have struck any bones, I said, looking back up at Captain McFarley. "If we remove the bullet and clean the wound thoroughly, the leg may still heal." A few of the pirates started to mutter skeptically under their breath, but Captain McFarley was silent, fixing me with a stare of deep consideration as he appeared to assess the credibility of my words. I must have succeeded in sounding somewhat competent, because after a moment he motioned for the others to clear away. Feeling slightly nauseous, I looked down at the man who had just become my patient. I recognized him vaguely, and I was sure I had seen him around the ship on various occasions, but my brain was too much of a frantic mess to find his name. Something Irish, I thought, looking at the wisps of red hair that poked out from beneath his bandana. I took a deep breath to try and calm myself, and looked around, organizing my thoughts. I need to sterilize the wound. Alcohol, I blurted out, jerking my head up towards Captain McFarley. I cleared my throat and tried again to express myself more eloquently. I need alcohol, I said, and eyed what appeared to be a tankard of ale in one of the crew members' hands. Something strong, like rum or whiskey, and I need a knife, a small one, I added. Captain McFarley looked at one of his men.
Get her a bottle of rum.
The pirate gave a quick nod and scurried off. Beside me, a pocket knife was held out in offering. I turned to accept it, pausing when I saw that it was Grayson who had given it. While a moment ago he had been clearly annoyed with me, he now regarded me with interest as he handed over the knife. Beyond that, his expression was hard and blank like a stone. Turning a blade over to me, a woman he had recently pinned and bound against her will, as if it were nothing, patiently awaiting my next move. Clearing my throat again softly, I took the knife from him and then knelt beside my patient. I glanced up at the man's face and found him regarding me with some apprehension. Very understandable apprehension, I decided. I had every reason to hate these pirates, and while I wasn't sure how much about me the crew knew, it was easy to see why he might feel uneasy with his fate in my hands. In the back of my head, I began to wonder why I was doing this, but I quickly pushed the thought away. I didn't have room for anything other than concentration. This will hurt quite a bit, I warned him, and then looked up at the others standing around me. Does anyone have something for him to bite down on? After some shuffling, one of the pirates produced a worn leather belt and knelt down to brace it between the man's teeth, while another returned with a bottle of rum. Though calling it such was perhaps generous, I thought, as I caught a whiff of it when it passed over to me. Still, it was at least potent, which would serve well in this case. I splashed the rum over top of the blade, then reached in and held the wound open with 2 fingers to carefully insert the knife. The man seized and let out a strangled cry, and I barely kept from further damaging his insides. I opened my mouth, but Grayson had already anticipated my next request and was kneeling beside me.
I'll hold him still,
he said. I gave him a nod, feeling a flutter in my chest, but I suppressed it as best I could. I needed a steady hand if I was going to manage this. I dug the knife in deeper. Grayson held the man down, while another pirate kept the leather belt lodged firmly in his mouth, preventing him from biting his own tongue. My mouth wrinkled in focus as I pushed further. Blood welling up out of the wound the deeper I went, and pooling around my fingers. Finally, the blade struck something hard. There. I used the knife to inspect the bullet as best I could, trying to ignore the way the man was heaving and wailing. It seemed to still be whole. My eyes flickered up towards Grayson and caught him watching me intently. I swallowed hard, and, once I had determined the best angle to do so, wedged the point of the knife underneath the bullet and set to work digging it out. The man shuddered, but Grayson managed to keep him from writhing too much, as I painstakingly shimmied the bullet up towards the surface of his skin. Frankly, I was rather surprised that the man had managed to remain conscious at all. It might as well have taken hours, as each second dragged on in utter silence, apart from the muffled moans of my patient. After eons of careful and minuscule maneuvering, the bullet finally came within sight, slick with blood and pus. With a heavy sigh of relief, I popped it out, taking hold with my fingers. The man gasped, as if he'd been drowning, utter relief washing over his expression. But unfortunately, I wasn't finished. I dropped the bloody bullet, and then picked up the rum again. And without giving him time to react, doused the wound in it. That time, he did pass out.